Hi, we have had a few videos already, and we have learned about what statistics is, the two branches of statistics being descriptive or inferential. We've looked at types of data being qualitative or categorical, quantitative or numerical. In the numerical type, we looked at discrete versus continuous. We then moved to experiments and designs of experiments. Also looked at observational studies a little bit and talked about some of the pieces that go into them, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of such things. In this video, we are going to now move a little bit into sampling methods. Um, Once we have a design in place, how do we go about getting our sample? Who do we pick? How do we pick them? And things of that nature. Again, this is just an overview. There are lots of complicated, different pieces that can be happened. Sometimes people will take parts of these, mix these together, but this is again just an overview of the different types that are out there. The first one is constructing a simple random sample using a random number generator. And this one is used a little bit, quite often, in fact, for randomly doing something. So if we have a large group of people, what some methods we could do is we could number everybody, throw those numbers into a big hat, mix them up, and then pick however many we wanted. Okay. However, sometimes our populations are going to be quite large. So what we might do is like use a random number generator, and there are methods out there. There's some online, some calculators have random number generators. So there's a lot of ways we can get these random numbers. But again, we're going to allow everybody in our population to have a number. So for example, let's just say we have 50 people that are in our population, and we want to grab 7 of them. We would get a random number generator to give us a list of numbers. We would give everyone in our population a number. And since we have 50, that being 2 digits, I would give everybody a 2-digit number. So for example, the number 1 would actually be 01, and then 02, 03, and so on down the line until I get to 50. Then in this random number, which would be just a long string of digits randomly created, I would look at the first 2 digits, and maybe it was the numbers 3, 4. So that means number 34 would be in my sample. Now, digits 3 and 4 might be the number 72. Well, 72 is outside my list because we only had 50. So I would just throw those out and go to the next 2 digits. And I would continue to go down 2 digits at a time and choose those people to be in my sample, throwing out numbers that I had already gotten or throwing out numbers that were outside my 1 to 50 range. Once I got my 8 people or however many I wanted, I would stop. But that's how you could use a random number generator. If we had a large population with maybe 1,000 people or 10,000 people, I would just increase the number of digits from 2 to however many I would need. So that's one way to get those randoms with a random number generator. Another one is, again, putting those numbers into a hat or putting names into a hat, and then randomly choosing people. It is very important to make sure that we use random sampling to create our studies, because we don't want to have some sort of biases pop in based on the way we've done this. So just kind of saying. All right. A stratified random sample is a little bit different. And this is going to be used a lot of times to make sure that we get people from each group or so. So the first thing we have to do is take our population and divide them up into non-overlapping groups. We call these groups strata. And then what we're going to do is then using our random number generator or some other random method, get random people from each of those groups. So common groups strata that are used to divide people is maybe by age. So like have our 20 to 25-year-olds or 26 to 30-year-olds and so on, breaking them up into different age categories and then getting 5 people from each of those age groups. You could do that at a college by maybe our first year students, if you've gone up to the second year status, third year status, fourth year, fifth year, whatever those pieces are, and then making sure to get some from each of those categories. Or maybe we're talking about the different degrees that you're getting. Maybe you are a STEM person versus sociology or psychology or music, and then making sure to get a couple students from each of those different categories. That would be what we would call a stratified random sample. Very similar to that is something that we call a cluster sample. That is when we still start by breaking everybody up into the different groups, but then we randomly choose a couple of groups and we ask everybody in that group or in that strata to be in our sample. So some examples of both of these is, let's say uh, I own a building that has 7 floors, and I have basically like an apartment building, and I have 7 floors in this building, and there's, I don't know, 10 apartments in each floor. My non-overlapping groups could be the floors. Okay. What I could do is then I could do a stratified random samples, choose a couple apartments from each floor. That would be a stratified random sample. Or I could choose a floor and just get everybody on those floors and randomly choose 2 or 3 floors to get my sample. That would be a cluster sample. Advantages to both. Well, when we do these groupings, we make sure to group them based on some sort of similarity. And by doing the floors, well, they all have the same floor, which means they may all have, the same type of heat or whatever happens on that floor, the elevator, the number of steps they have to climb, whatever the situation may be. So by choosing a couple from each floor, we're going to make sure to get anything that might be particular for that floor covered. But we might miss the fact that we got the east side of the building versus the south side of the building, because it may have happened that we didn't get everybody from all sides of our building. Where if we had clustered, we would have gotten everybody from around the building. So depending on what we're trying to get after, we would choose one or another type. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. It is a little bit of more work because we do have to get those strata figured out than just randomly throwing every apartment into a bucket and picking somebody. It is very cost effective. It does give us a really good representation, making sure that we do have every group covered. Okay. Another type of sampling that is out there is something called systematic sampling. This one is used a lot, especially in phone call situations where they have these phone numbers. And what they will do is they'll randomly choose a starting point, and then they'll choose every 5th person or every 8th person or every 9th person. Then the something person is that K that I'm talking about in this statement. So maybe we wanted 75 people. We randomly start with get a random number generator, and it'll tell us where to randomly start And then we would also then randomly pick how often many we'll skip, and we would get our sample that way. So, or maybe just having them walk in the door. We're going to start at 3 o'clock at Walmart, and we're going to pick every third customer that walks through the door to give them this survey or stop them and ask them a couple questions. So that would be an example of a systematic sampling. Advantages, they're quick and easy. They're easy to set up. Disadvantages, you could possibly see some biases. Our textbook has a really nice example of some of those biases that happen. If you're doing something out of a phone book and you might have just happened to only need a small sample, and you started in a place that has a Smith. Well, maybe Smith happens to be all the Germans in town. I know this is just fictional, but maybe every Smith in this area is German. And so we're getting all these German traits coming through. That's one way these biases could happen. Or if you're talking to every third customer, well, all of a sudden this huge bus comes in of all these people, and you were only going to get a couple. So then again, you may get some sort of bias based on who these people are that are coming in your door. A convenience sample is just that, one that is very convenient. There are many different types. Sometimes just leaving a survey on tables is very convenient. You just put them out there, and whoever fills it out, it's like a voluntary response sampling. Sending an email. I know schools and lots of workplaces will send out emails asking for response. Sometimes companies will do that as well. Sorry about that. Will do that. They just send out an email to everybody in their email list, and they have huge email lists. And those that want to respond, respond. So convenient. However it is convenient, that will be the way to do it. One of the most convenient ways that we are seeing now, it used to be phone calls. You'd get phone call surveys, people wanting information. Now it is email. So advantages, super easy, super quick to do, very easy to create a survey, attach it to an email list, boom, it's out, it's done. Disadvantages, these will result in biases, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But very much going to get the biases showing up in these types of samples. So speaking of biases, biases happen when you get certain feelings more often than not. Or having things happen because of how the sample is set up, or how the survey is set up, or how the experiment is set up. So first of all, a selection bias. Sometimes that will happen, can happen in any one of these, is you don't get every group that you want to talk to covered based on how it's set out. So like in an email survey, you are not going to, then we a lot of times call some of these missing pieces being under coverage. And that's going to when somebody isn't included at all or not fully covered. So email ones that we talked about, very convenient, happen all the time. Only go to people who have computers. I know in today's world, we feel that everybody has a computer. However, that is just not the case. Some of our very poor in this country do not own computers or have Wi-Fi or those luxuries that we think of as common. So those would be very undercovered. And that's one of the groups that is really hard to get information from, are the extremely poor that are out there. The ones that are homeless, that have no mailbox, that are living on the streets, living in their cars, they just we don't have methods that are easy to get at the information from them. Okay. Um, Response biases can happen when something is written in a way that you're not getting the exact response that you should be getting. So maybe it's not truthful, not a truthful response. Um, Sometimes, like, let's say a police officer comes to your door and asks you a question. Have you been um, speeding lately? Of course, you're going to say no. This is done a lot, like underage students. When you were in high school, a lot of times teachers will come in and they give you these surveys and ask you how many of, ask you, have you tried drugs? Have you been drinking? All those types of surveys, they ask you these questions. Well, first thing, as an underage student, someone who's not 18, drugs aren't legal anyway, ever, but the alcohol question, a lot of students will not be truthful in something that is illegal, okay? Or maybe it's the person who's asking it. Are you going to be truthful when your mother asks you a question? Or if this question's coming from the school, how many days have you skipped? How many classes do you not go to? Those sorts of questions you're less likely to be completely honest with when it comes from someone of authority. And when it's coming in the form of an email, um, again, that's another reason for the non-response, which is the next one. The non-response bias is we just don't answer the survey. How many times have you gotten an email survey and you just hit delete? The people that reply to these surveys usually have very strong opinions, either for or against, but again, very strong opinions, or the very bored that feel like their information must be told to everybody. So those are some reasons that we get some of these biases, is because those are the people that common thread that you're very strongly against or very strongly for, those two common threads, or my opinion matters to everybody. Those threads link those people together, and those biases, those common thoughts come through. A recording bias is just that. He said yes, you wrote down no. So whoever was taking the information from you recorded it incorrectly. Maybe when they asked you how many drinks do you have per day and you said 3, they wrote down 8 because they couldn't read your handwriting on the paper, however it happened to be. So lots of different things can happen in that recording bias. Design bias, that is a lot of times how the question is worded. Sometimes in the question itself, it can be worded to make you want to reply a certain way. And trying to dream up of an example right off the top of my head is not always easy. So I'm going to be a little bit triggering here for some of you possibly. So just I'm apologize right now. Is someone might ask you a question, do you feel it's okay to kill babies? And of course, you would probably say no. And then they could follow up with questions about abortion. So that is kind of a design bias piece that sometimes happens, where they state a question that is like, of course you're going to say yes or no based on the way it's stated, but what they're really trying to get after is something a little bit more deep. Okay. And these biases can affect the outcomes of studies, because if things aren't done to try to eliminate these biases, And if they use these studies then to predict how the population is going to react or what we should do to cater to the population, then we should make sure to do a better job at kind of making sure to get these biases under control or to eliminate them completely if at all possible. So this is a little bit of an overview of sampling. In our next modules, we're actually going to start doing some more doing of things. This kind of we've just kind of talked about the terminology, getting used to the ideas of what's in statistics and the different parts of statistics. We're now going to turn and look a little bit harder at and actually do some of the pieces that is in statistics. So I will see you in my next videos, and I'm hoping you are enjoying some of these. Have a great day.